Continuing Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough. We are probably going to finish Marcus Cato today. However, Solonius desired him to undertake the business and to give the young girl to whom he pleased, she being a humble servant of his, who stood in need of his care and patronage. Upon this Cato, without any more ado, told him he desired to have the damsel himself. These words, as may well be imagined, at first astonished the man, conceiving that Cato was as far off from marrying as he from a likelihood of being allied to the family of one who had been consul and had triumphed. But perceiving him in earnest, he consented willingly, and going onwards to the forum, they quickly completed the bargain. Whilst the marriage was in hand, Cato's son, taking some of his friends along with him, went and asked his father if it were for any offense he brought in a stepmother upon him. But Cato cried out, "Far from it, my son. I have no fault to find with you or anything of yours. Only I desire to have many children, and to leave the commonwealth more such citizens as you are." Pisistratus, the tyrant of Athens, made, they say, this answer to his sons when they were grown men, when he married his second wife, Timonassa of Argos, by whom he had, it is said, Iaphon and Thessalus. Cato had a son by this second wife, to whom, from his mother, he gave the surname of Solonius. In the meantime his eldest died in his praetorship, of whom Cato often makes mention in his books, as having been a good man. He is said, however, to have borne the loss moderately and like a philosopher, and was nothing the more remiss in attending to affairs of state, so that he did not, as Lucius, Lucullus, and Metellus Pius did, grow languid in his old age, as though public business were a duty once to be discharged and then quitted. Nor did he, like Scipio Africanus, because envy had struck at his glory, turn from the public, and change and pass away the rest of life without doing anything, but as one persuaded Dionysius that the most honorable tomb he could have would be to die in the exercise of his dominion. So Cato thought that old age to be the most honorable which was busied in public affairs, though he would now and then, when he had leisure, recreate himself with husbandry and writing. And, indeed, he composed various books and histories, and in his youth he addicted himself to agriculture for profit's sake, for he used to say he had but two ways of getting agriculture and parsimony, and now, in his old age, the first of these gave him both occupation and a subject of study. He wrote one book on country matters, in which he treated particularly even of making cakes and preserving fruit, it being his ambition to be curious and singular in all things. His suppers at his country house used also to be plentiful. He daily invited his friends and neighbors about him, and passed the time merrily with them, so that his company was not only agreeable to those of the same age, but even to younger men, for he had experience in many things, and had been concerned in much, both by word and deed, that was worth the hearing. He looked upon a good table as the best place for making friends, where the commendations of brave and good citizens were usually introduced, and little said of base and unworthy ones, as Cato would not give leave in his company to have anything either good or ill, said about them. Some will have the overthrow of Carthage to have been one of his last acts of state, when indeed Scipio the younger did, by his valor, give it the last blow, but the war chiefly by the counsel and advice of Cato was undertaken. On the following occasion, Cato was sent to the Carthaginians and Masinissa, king of Numidia, who were at war with one another, to know the cause of their difference. He, it seems, had been a friend of the Romans from the beginning, and they too, since they were conquered by Scipio, were of the Roman confederacy, having been shorn of their power by loss of territory and a heavy tax, finding Carthage not, as the Romans thought, low and in all ill condition, but well manned, full of riches and all sorts of arms and ammunition, and perceiving the Carthaginians carrying it high, he conceived that it was not a time for the Romans to adjust affairs between them and Masinissa, but rather that they themselves would fall into danger unless they should find means to check this rapid new growth of Rome's ancient, irreconcilable enemy. Rather than try to not give them reason to fight them, Therefore, returning quickly to Rome, he acquainted the Senate that the former defeats and blows given to the Carthaginians had not so much diminished their strength as it had abated their imprudence and folly, that they were not become weaker, but more experienced in war, and did only skirmish with the Numidians to exercise themselves the better to cope with the Romans, that the peace and league they had made was but a kind of suspension of war, which awaited a fairer opportunity to break out again. Moreover, they say that, shaking his gown, he took occasion to let drop some African figs before the Senate, and on their admiring the size and beauty of them, he presently added that the place that bore them was but 3 days' sail from Rome. Nay, he never after this gave his opinion, but at the end he would be sure to come out with this sentence: also, Carthage, methinks, ought utterly to be destroyed. But Publicus Scipio Nasica would always declare his opinion to the contrary. In these words, it seems requisite to me that Carthage should still stand, for seeing his countrymen to be grown wanton and insolent, and the people made by their prosperity obstinate and disobedient to the Senate, and drawing the whole city whither they would after them, he would have had the fear of Carthage to serve as a bit to hold the contumacy of the multitude, and he looked upon the Carthaginians as too weak to overcome the Romans, and too great to be despised by them. On the other side, it seemed a perilous thing to Cato that a city which had always been great, and was now grown sober and wise, by reason of its former calamities, should still lie, as it were, in wait for the follies and dangerous exercises of the over-powerful Roman people, so that he thought it the wisest course to have all outward dangers removed when they had so many inward ones among themselves. Thus Cato, they say, stirred up the third and last war against the Carthaginians, but no sooner was the said war begun than he died, prophesying of the person that should put an end to it, who was then only a young man, but being tribune in the army, he in several fights gave proof of his courage and conduct, the news of which had been brought to Cato's ears at Rome. He thus expressed himself: the only wise man of them all is he, the others e'en as shadows flit and flee. This prophecy Scipio soon confirmed by his actions. Cato left no posterity except one son by his second wife, who was named, as we said, Cato Solanius, and a grandson by his eldest son, who died. Cato Solanius died when he was praetor, but his son Marcus was afterwards consul, and he was grandfather of Cato the philosopher, who, for virtue and renown, was one of the most eminent personages of his time. And, well, it's good to develop yourself in different ways like he did, and certainly to do stuff other than just flop in for the TV and all that as a retirement that actually benefited more than himself. Same thing with how you raise your family. It's not just, oh, I'd like to have children. And, well, what will your children be for society?